Alright, so this is going to be part 8 to what if Deku had Bond's powers. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so I know it took a long time to do this. It's just that I needed to really just rewatch the series and get a better understanding of what to do with this what if. So I made a poll on my channel what ifs I should do, like long running what ifs, like continuing parts, and Bond Deku was basically the highest out of all of them. So I'll probably do another poll either on Patreon or on my channel again. So if you want to watch these videos early, you could go on my Patreon, which this will be posted on Patreon first and then YouTube a little bit later. I'm not sure how long, but you know what I mean. So in the last part, we just got done with the movie basically, so we're gonna continue off of that. So they would have came back to their and on the first day back to school, this is where Aizawa would tell them that they're going to a kind of camping trip, but it's not really a trip, it's more like a training kind of thing. They're going to this boot camp basically, and during this they have some time to kind of prepare their kind of what they want to bring, so they have a couple of days. So everyone's pretty much excited since they get to go on this kind of trip. Some people don't really understand it, or it's kind of misleading, I guess, the way that Aizawa would explain it to a certain extent. And yeah, so this would also be around the time where they would try to get their grades up, because at this time, depending on how well they did, they would have basically either had extra classes or they would have been able to train more. So that's a kind of a big thing. So this is where they all have this idea to basically go to the mall, and they all go at the same time as kind of like a class kind of trip, you could say. So they all go, and obviously Deku would have wanted to go, since in this one I gave him a harem, so he would have had to go with his, I guess, girlfriends to go and shop. So when they're there, they all kind of want to split up, right? So all the guys go their separate ways, and everyone really wants to get separate things. So that's what they do. Deku doesn't really have anything in particular he wants to get, so he ends up, or I believe he wanted to get more weight in the series, so we're gonna give him something similar to that, because remember, like I said in the couple first videos, the more his muscles are able to regenerate faster, and obviously a lot faster because of immortality, so he's able to recover faster from things like weightlifting and his muscles being shredded and things like that. So he wanted to get like higher weights and see what he could do with that. Remember, in this one he doesn't have one for all, so he has to basically build up his own strength. So yeah, he goes and tries to find different stores, and he sits down for a second. This is when someone actually goes and approaches him. He doesn't know who this person is, but he wraps his arm around him and asks him for kind of a photo, because he was popular during the sports festival. At least this is what Deku thinks. So he obliges, and this is where Shigaraki's basically next to him, and he tells him, or he basically, this is where Deku pretty much finds out, and Deku's kind of shocked. He's kind of not really scared, but nervous a bit, because he knows he can't die, but he knows that everyone else is very, very vulnerable, especially with someone like Shigaraki that could just disintegrate you. So Shigaraki basically starts, it kind of threatens Deku a little bit, like, you know, are you fast enough? You might be able to stop me, but are you fast enough to really stop me from touching anyone? You know, there's a big crowd here, it'd be very easy for someone to just turn to dust. And Deku's kind of like, um, he knows this is true, so he kind of backs down a bit. And this is where Shigaraki still has his like hand around his neck, but not really going for it. Deku basically tells Shigaraki that there's nothing he could really do to him. He will just regenerate from any kind of injury he does. So this is what Shigaraki says. He says, "Yes, I know, but that won't matter. If you're turned to dust, it'll take you a few seconds, and then what happens to all the passerbys?" Deku then becomes quiet, and he continues. So Shigaraki basically asked Deku about why Stain was so popular and why he was such a hard kind of fight to a certain extent. Why did he have so much influence, and why doesn't he? And Deku basically explains that Shigaraki has no motivation, he has no conviction like Stain did. Even though Stain was a villain, Deku could still understand where he's coming from, and that's what really drives people to support someone like Stain, and why he became so popular and has so much influence on everyone. And they would look around the store or the mall and they would see hero killer merchandise, and this is where Shigaraki would understand it. He needs something that will, convince him or give him that conviction that he needs. So he gets the idea of just, he wants to be the symbol, or he wants to kill the symbol of peace. That is his conviction. He wants to do that, and that is what's going to drive him going forward. So Deku, eventually, this is where Uraraka would come and basically ask why he has his hand around Deku. This is where Shigaraki would be like, "Oh, it's nothing. I'm just a fan. I saw you guys in the sports festival," and this is where he would leave and get mixed into the crowd. After that, this is where the police would come and basically shut down the mall, trying to find any evidence of Shigaraki, just like they do in the anime. After this, everyone would kind of be like trying to support Deku, see if he was, any way, I guess traumatized, but he wouldn't really be, or just to see how he is, right? After that, to get his kind of like mind off of it, they kind of get this idea, or not really get this idea, but it's a kind of a coincidence that it happened. So obviously Mineta and Kaminari would have done that idea to try to get the pool, or be able to use the pool so that they could see the girls. And I think Deku in this one would also want to go to the pool and kind of use it for a bit, try to get his mind off of what Shigaraki said, but also maybe peek out on some girls. So after that, this is where Aizawa would eventually say yes, because they think they're going to use it for training. After that, this is where they kind of just mess around and they have that contest with the swimming. So we're just gonna skip that because it's not really important. So we get to the day where they actually go on the trip. So everyone is very excited because they don't know what's gonna happen. But before they actually get there, this is where they stop the bus, and they're around like an hour before they get there, I believe, at least on bus. But they get out, and this is where one of the I think it was one of the heroes come out, and I believe her name was Pixie Doll or something like that. She was a member of the Wild Pussycats, I believe. But yeah, so what happens is that Aizawa basically explains that they're not going to be able to go to use the bus anymore, and what happens is that the bus just kind of leaves. And what they need to do is that they have to go through the forest all the way to the place where they're gonna stay. And if they don't make it by a sundown or a certain time, then they get nothing to eat. So everyone's really shocked by this, and especially Mineta, since he has to pee. He starts running into the forest, and this is where Pixie Bob basically shows off her quirk, and that was to control like earth or things like that, kind of rock and dirt. So she's able to create basically different creatures with it. So as Mineta was about to get hit, this is where Deku basically comes in and snatches him up so he doesn't get hurt. After that, they all kind of gather around to basically try to mow through the kind of the forest, so it makes it easier for everyone because they want to work together. So Deku is one of the people who, he's kind of a powerhouse. He's a power type, I would say, also. So it'd mostly be Bakugo, Todoroki, not really Kaminari. I forgot the person, but it was the one with the belly button laser, or the naval laser, I believe it was called. He would have been there too, just because his laser would be very good at destroying these kind of things. So yeah, so they would slowly go through the through the forest, and Deku doesn't really want to leave them, as well as they don't really have a good way of transportating everyone, as there is no one with a flying quirk in their class, as well as it'd just be too much to carry everyone at once, and it'd be too time consuming to carry one at a time. So they just have to fight through it, which they pretty much do. Deku doesn't really feel too much he doesn't feel too much I guess fatigue from this. His muscles are regenerating at a faster rate, but he still gets tired eventually. I think it was like one of the weaknesses of Bond, with the ability to take other people's like strength. He does feel weakness a little bit later on. I believe that's how it worked. So they get through, and by the time they get through, it would be around probably a little bit before sunset, or not sunset, but yeah, I believe it was sunset. So they have some time, but it isn't like a drastic difference between this and the anime, because they can't really improve their speed too much, because Deku, even though he is very strong, he isn't someone that could speed everyone up or help them get there faster. So all he could do is just destroy the kind of monsters, or really those earth creatures that Pixie Bob created. So yeah, eventually they get there and they have their own kind of I guess dinner, and this is where Deku meets Koda, I believe his name was. And what happens is that Deku tries to get along with the kid, but he ends up getting kicked in, well, you know what I mean. He gets kicked in his nether regions, and Deku is a little bit affected by this, but he obviously can't do anything to a kid. Ito would be there to basically talk about how that was kind of a low blow to do. So after that, Deku just has this idea of like, why was this kid doing that? He doesn't really know why. And eventually they get to the point where I guess you could skip a bit, and this is where they're kind of in their own public, like their own baths areas, where it's separated by a wall. Mineta would try to go over the wall, but he would be stopped by Koda as well as Deku. So Koda would try to stop Mineta and end up falling. This is where Deku would actually grab him, and he would bring him to, I forgot her name, but it was the other member of the Wild Pussycats. I believe her name was, I don't remember. It started with an M, but she basically is, I believe, the cousin, or it was either cousin or aunt of Koda. And what happens is she basically explains what happened to his parents, that they were basically killed by a villain, and that's why he resents heroes. He doesn't want anyone to really get hurt like that. So Deku starts to understand his kind of mindset, and he begins to sympathize with Koda a bit more. So yeah, so that's gonna be the end of the video. If you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS so I know you support the channel. If you want to support the channel in other ways, you could go and pledge to my Patreon to get videos early. You just have to pledge $1. And if you want to be part of the weekly raffle, again, it's only $1, but you can do more. So I gotta do a shout out to my Patreons, or I guess to the Patreon. So we only have one patron, I think that's how you call them, or yeah, patron. So I gotta like to give a shout out to PandaMan8 for donating $5 or pledging $5. So if you want to join the list or join the other patrons, then you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan. So yeah, with that being said, if you liked the video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And with that being said, it's gonna be the video. So yeah.